most of the world is experiencing heat waves right now. And so people are definitely experiencing this extreme heat. And it might seem like, oh, well, it's a lot cooler in Chamonix, right, than it is in Rome or in Greece or in Phoenix in the US. So maybe we're not experiencing climate change. But actually, the truth of the matter is that the Alps are experiencing climate change twice as fast as most of the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. And so temperatures are rising. We're just like kind of starting from a lower temperature. And so we're not getting, 46-degree heat, but we're getting temperatures that are way higher than, we ever see as a general rule here. And the way that that is impacting the mountains, well, there's a ton of different ways. When I speak, specifically just like about my project on Mont Blanc, it was a project that I had for several years, and we weren't getting enough snow in the winter to fill in the crevasses where I wanted to be, where I needed to cross. And so I think that's an indication of one of the things that we're seeing. So like we're seeing more droughts. We're seeing in winter the 0-degree isotherm, so where precipitation is falling as snow instead of as rain, is moving higher and higher up. So we're getting more rain. So that's what we really saw, is that it was a drought, and then when precip did fall, it was as rain. So it didn't, like, the snow didn't land and stay on the glaciers. And then so we see a lot of glacier retreat. Another thing that we see are these extreme weather events where it'll get really hot. We have heat waves and it stays hot for a long time. And that creates kind of this inertia where things start to warm up, and then it's kind of hard to slow it down. So even after the temperature, like the air temperature, drops for a little while, the heat is still having this effect because we get this inertia. And then we see a lot of permafrost melt. So permafrost, for those of your listeners, if they don't know, I mean, the name is in it. It's like permanently frozen. And we know that there's a lot of permafrost in the ground in the Arctic and sort of, in way northern Europe. But how we see it here in the Alps is that permafrost essentially can act like glue, holding mountains together. So mountains aren't necessarily just like a monolith of rock, right? It's not just like one giant rock. It's lots of rocks kind of stuck together. And some of them are like balanced perfectly. And some of them are literally like glued on by frozen ice. And when that melts, things can fall down. And that has it's extraordinarily dangerous. In Chamonix, we've had, really big rockfall events. The most famous ones were in the heat waves in 2003, 2005 on the Drew, when the whole face of the mountain came down. But what you were talking about with rockfall, that was maybe not permafrost, but it was this area that at the top of the mountain that usually stays permanently frozen was melting, and that was going down behind the rocks, the like water. And then overnight it freezes and expands and then makes things unstable and they can fall. So like you see a lot of different phenomena that are going on at the same time. We're also seeing the plants, the vegetation is changing. The animals are having to adapt. They're moving upslope up the mountain. So like in Chamonix, for example, we have this one glacier, the Glacier de Pèlerin, which has receded a ton. And we found at a place where there was a glacier in 2008, we found a tree already growing, like a large tree already growing up. So I think that the Alps are going to be changing really fast. And that's one of the reasons why it's interesting, right? Because I was talking about like all these different ecosystems stacked on top of each other in the mountains. But then if you were to put it on the flat, on the horizontal, that'd be like hundreds of kilometers. And so it's harder to see changes in adaptation because a species would have to like travel north really far. Whereas here they can just travel upslope like 100 meters and find a different ecosystem. So we see plants and animals that like move up the mountain as they go. But the mountains are, because it's like conical, it's a cone shape, there isn't space for all of them. So some species are probably going to be dying out in the next, 30 years or so.
It is a very interesting perspective and something I've never looked at it this way, how you explain it, that obviously because you're going up, the absolute change, if you said 100 meters, 5 degrees more, it's nothing compared to, when you talk in kilometers and 10 and 20 degrees. But when you look at it from a percentage point of view, of the whole ecosystem, then obviously, yeah, moving 200-300 meters up a mountain is, 5 to 10% of the entire height of the mountain that suddenly
Yeah.
is completely
Yeah.
changing.
And just the surface is reduced. So like we take some species, like what we call Arctic alpine species. So there are a lot of the Arctic alpine species are going to be like the animals that change color in the winter, like a hare, like the rabbit that turns white in the winter, or the rock ptarmigan. And we see them a lot. There's like a lot left up in the Arctic, but down in the Alps, they're like relics of the last ice age. And they're moving upslope because they need the snow. Like they can only be camouflaged when they're in the snow. But if there's less and less snow, they're moving up. And then there's just like less and less space for them up high. So it's for those species that are kind of emblematic species of the Alps, they're definitely losing out.